in the fight, but you gotta let punches go. You can't wait until they get in your mix and bang, go right back. And don't take 30 seconds in the front of the punch. Alexander, I'm the best ever. There's never been anybody like me. I'm Sonny Liston, I'm Jack Dippy. There's no one like I'm from Airport. There's no one that can match me. My style is impeccable. My defense is impregnable. Second match. Get that combination. I kept telling you he had no punch. He couldn't hit. He's swinging like a sissy. He's missing. Let me see you bust. I hadn't started dancing yet. But tremendous hurt. First round and Burns gets hurt. Burns got stunned. Acko was stunned early in the round. Great first round. Incredible. Perhaps one of the best in middleweight history. Hey, that black guy, he hit hard. Bang, 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 bang. Fire.
What's going on, Boxing Public? We've reached another weekend of boxing. It's your host, writer and reporter for RealCombatMedia.com, G.Alé here. And man, what a week. I guess I'm kind of thinking in the larger sum of the whole with news in general too. So that's another thing if you've been paying attention. Yeah, I mean, we're going to review this past weekend's fights because obviously, I mean, this is a boxing podcast. We will talk about, Joe Joyce's KO win over Romain Stavern, DeGale losing, surprisingly, to Chris Eubank Jr. And I actually will speak on if that actually is a surprise. But what we will lead in today's podcast is the big news, at least that launched around Tuesday, which was the cancellation, or would you say of more or less just the talks of a rematch, because once they were never necessarily, I wouldn't say they were necessarily on, but have now actually ceased overall. Just the talks have now stopped, and the rematch, at least is at this point, is no part of the seeable future. At least the WBC confirmed that, at least from Tyson Fury, that he will be choosing at least to take a voluntary fight before taking the rematch against Deontay Wilder. It was actually the talking point from Tyson Fury himself, who at least responded to Deontay Wilder, who was pretty upset, obviously, calling Tyson Fury a sorry motherfucker, for the, basically essentially blaming him for this fight not happening. And we'll actually, what we're mainly what's going to take up a good portion of today's podcast is we're going to basically just dissect overall this whole issue in general. We don't necessarily like to dab too much into the actual, boxing politics, figures and numbers of just, I've always just hated. It's part of the game I've never cared for, never really liked discussing it. And honestly, as fans, as it's been mentioned numerous times on this podcast, it means nothing for us, as far as the figures and everything of what these fighters actually make. And yeah, so again, it shouldn't be really a point of discussion, but I mean, it's the reason why the fights aren't happening. So I guess it means something to a certain extent. Along the fights here, I mean, and according actually to Stephen Espinosa, who at least was quoted yesterday, actually, was pretty much blaming Tyson Fury as at least the reason for this fight not happening, and basically the signing with ESPN just last week for that $80 million multi-fight deal with Bob Arum and Top Rank. I mean, essentially, he was saying that the fight was pretty close to actually happening, and then with the signing of, Tyson Fury going to Bob Arum, pretty much just sealed it right then and there. Wouldn't necessarily call out Tyson Fury to say that was a way for him to duck the fight in general, but is at least stating that that would be a tactic for someone who is looking to duck the fight. But obviously, considering as fans, we know what we saw there. There's, if anybody's more inclined to actually not taking this fight out of fear of the result and what previously happened, it would really be Wilder. Again, given that he got whooped on for a good portion of that fight. But so who should basically let's all right, let's just backtrack. So what necessarily went wrong? I'm gonna start with Deontay Wilder's party. Where blame can be shifted upon them is more or less just overall their management and just how weak it's been in general. Have been terrible, at least with setting him up, at least getting his fights in order. He's been a pro for quite some time and even has been champion. Actually, a good portion of his criticism is due to the WBC allowing him to really just get by for so long and not taking the mandatory fights. And that's pretty much what the PBC at least is in lines with, of pretty much just making sure that he can get by without necessarily doing what was required of him and basically taking the challenging fights. That was the major criticism from him for quite some time. And I mean, even up to the point of the Povetkin situation, which obviously, like you mentioned last time, Povetkin's doing, of course, why that fight didn't take place. But even still, look how long it actually took for that to actually fall into place. And even with this, and I found this actually astounding when you consider the deals that the top three fighters at least have. Anthony Joshua obviously goes without saying. Multi-millions. I mean, he's making $34 million just for fighting Big Baby Miller. Tyson Fury obviously is just now signing the $80 million deal with ESPN, and that's for just 3 fights. Deontay Wilder just made off of his and he went balls to the wall. I mean, truly through the ringer here with Luis Ortiz and made $2 million, just over $2 million as a WBC champion. This is the WBC champion making like what? I would say that I wouldn't say that's necessarily prospect money, but that's a big star for that's a big star who hasn't gotten a belt yet type money at this point. And he's been making that for some time now. And you consider that's chump change compared to his peers. His management has not been doing him favors when it comes to actually getting his money's worth, at least for what he represents, which is the WBC champion. I mean, something should be said for that. And the fact that they've sat on numerous offers, the fact that even when it came to the Eddie Hearn and Anthony Joshua situation, even to this day, there are still more offers to his manager that they've just sat on. And at least seeing the moves there, each offer has increased. It's clear that at least one side is actually interested in making this fight happen. Finkel has sat on numerous offers and has not been doing any favors. I mean, if you're going to sit out at some point in time, this playing hard to get, really. I mean, you gotta give it up at some point in time. Otherwise, you're just sitting out and you're just really hurting yourself. And that's what it's done up to this point. He's now hurting himself. And honestly, let's consider this. How powerless is that whole team? And think about just Showtime and PBC in general. How powerless they are if the WBC championship isn't with Deontay Wilder. I mean, it may sound like a lot initially, but I mean, when you think about it, that's a lot that's coming out. And considering Showtime is already kind of pretty much on the downturn and really on the same exit plan as HBO. I mean, you got Erie's Landy Laura headlining this weekend. And, that's nothing that no one's really going to be writing home about. No one's going to be racing home, from the pubs or anything like that to get back home to make it to that fight. I can really assure you that. If anything, we might be showing up just for the Ortiz versus Hammer fight. But it's so I mean that's just essentially what his issue with Deontay Wilder just has and I've said this for a while, is just his management they don't do him any favors at all when it comes to these situations. So Wilder, you would figure at this stage needs to be the one on the front foot. Like, fuck all everyone else is sending the offers to you. You're not the unified champion here. It should be a little bit. There should be a little bit more effort actually shown on their side, especially considering that boxing is not this, at least for this company, is not their main forte. They're secondaries. They do other shit in their meantime as a way of actually making means for themselves. So that's again Wilder. But now we shift on to Tyson Fury. And Tyson Fury actually could hold a good portion of the blame here. Simply just because of the stark difference and contrast of how he even sounded, at least in the lead up of this rematch and the lead up of the first fight. The actual talking point that came from Tyson Fury when it came to in response of Deontay Wilder's anger of the fight not happening, he told him that, hey, look, you're an unknown. Use this opportunity to build up notoriety for you, and then come back and we can have a fight. He went from seeking legacy to Mayweather talking points. And that's just a huge jump. And I think that's just created a very, very bad taste. And a lot of, even if his fans, most likely, or at least especially, should I say, I've been on quite a few boxing groups, and that's all I see is just, it's actually kind of funny because you know what? For a while, they talked some of the most delusional shit, but in fair credit to them, they're actually at least some of the more let's say fanboy types are actually calling it what it is. This is nothing but a duck from Tyson Fury. What the fuck are you doing? This isn't like you. What the hell are you on about? And what I found really interesting, and it just kind of shows really just how all over the place this thing really is that Frank Warren was quoted in stating that he actually blames ESPN for the delay, which is, not necessarily the greatest thing you want to hear after someone just signing the deal with them, or at least as a co-promoter with them. And he's basically blaming the talking point that Tyson Fury himself said on ESPN. They're stating that it was ESPN's idea to actually hold this up and to create, at least to create the option for one fight and then the rematch. Which, I mean, the reason why I find this interesting is just because of just how inconsistent it is with your whole team. Like, how does your own fighters state the exact talking point? And if anything, making it into his own. He turned it into a criticism. He poked it in the eye of Deontay Wilder. And now Frank Warren is blaming the entire talking point himself that Tyson Fury, we just heard himself say on ESPN. It's a shit house, man. And it's all over the place. That just really blew my mind, the fact that they can't even agree on what the fuck the reason is that this fight isn't happening, which shows you that they actually hold more of the water on the reason for this fight not happening. That's what happened with guilty parties, is that they can't keep their story straight because they're too busy lying so much that you can't keep up with the lies. And the fact that Tyson Fury takes this fight, like Espinosa said, talks were going swimmingly for the rematch, and then just out of nowhere, you sign with ESPN for an $80 million fight. And I'm not gonna, besmirch that at all. That's great for Tyson Fury. $80 million. Are you kidding me? That's a good thing for him. 3 fights. That's excellent. It's just over $25 million a fight. again, back to the point of Deontay Wilder not making what he should. But that's, again, a point that was already made. But it's back to what Fury's doing here is the fact that you have all of that lined up. And of course, again, it's great that you got the deal put in place. But my thing is, if you're working on that, all right, so you're still going to work on that. Let's say that was going to be your foreseeable future anyway. You were always going to sign with ESPN, but you still at least wanted to do the deal still wanted to have the rematch with Deontay Wilder. Why would you completely hijack the talks like that and literally pull that is like an eject button on the plane for you to completely leave talks of Early's having the fight even happen? You can't honestly tell me, any of you guys, let's say this, we're making a move, you're moving across the country, you're planning on working for someone out there, but you were at least in line for a promotion at your current position. You got talks, you guys are getting ready to, you've been doing the training for the actual next role of what you're about to do. And then you just flew to California, flew on the other side of the country and just took the deal. And then your job's like, what the fuck? I thought we were literally about to put you on board and have you vice president of whatever the hell. What just happened here? You see what I mean? Like, you don't make major moves like that without assurance in place of what could possibly fall apart with that decision. If he knew that something that could completely sabotage talks of a rematch, why wouldn't you try to put something in place, or at least to be assured that that's going to work out, or at least that's something you can do? He didn't even need to take this deal right now. He could have actually just waited right after the rematch. So again, I mean, the fact that, the talking points, the fact that it's inconsistent with the team, and the move in general itself is just self-inflicted sabotage. I mean, it is really disappointing. Again, considering a guy who talked nothing but legacy, wanting to make the big fights, and with an individual who really just thrives on the actual events of these, of the fights here. It's not like he's he has an issue really when it comes to getting up for the big fights. You know what I mean? And say he goes out there and he's fighting Rivas or Jennings or Pulev, you know what I mean? And who's to say he doesn't get depressed in the middle of one of those camps? You know what I mean? And now you actually have the stigma of, for some reason, it's hard to get rematches with Tyson Fury. It's all of this is just, he royally fucked himself by doing all of this. All right, so let me I'm gonna just do a brief stop here, at least of my talking points. I'm gonna just read some of the chat here because I actually see it. It's a bit lively here. What's going on, Alexis? I see you on the chat here. Why would you volunteer to take less for a rematch when you know you can get more? Well, listen, and we're actually let me keep going, Alexis, because I think you might like where I'm going here, because now we go on from shifting the blame, because I kind of wanted to at least get it out there that both you guys have some skin in the game here when it comes to blame here. But now, what's next? What's next for these two? Obviously, a fight is due for either one of these guys, and then potentially a rematch. We've heard talks like this before with the, what was it? Canelo and Triple G fight, where that got pushed back about 2 more fights than it was actually promised. So we'll see how this is actually fulfilled on word. But it looks like the prospects of Dominic Brazil versus Deontay Wilder is on the horizon, or as well as a Dillian White fight. He is due to fight either one of these guys, due as a WBC mandatory fight again, which is something that he's been pushing off for, I feel like, almost 4 years now. when he at least comes to his mandatories. Well, Luis Ortiz, I'm wondering if I think they considered that, but that's a different point. But he's at least going to now have to fight Dominic Brazil or Dillian White. It's looking like since Brazil would be the easier fight as of right now, that's what at least seems to be on the horizon for Deontay Wilder right now. It's kind of funny now, actually, that the dynamic has switched to these two having to fight Anthony Joshua leftovers after there was the criticism of, at least from Tyson Fury, that he was going to be fighting a bum, or who's this bum? And now looks like Tyson Fury, who will be fighting another Anthony Joshua leftover in Joseph Parker. So, or at least possibly Kubrat Pulev, since at least that is also a little bit easier for fights, at least with the switch to the new camp. What I wanted to at least get back onto, though, when it came to the offers and fighting and whatnot for the amount here, Deontay Wilder did not do himself any favors by stating that he is a free agent and that he can fight anywhere on any network. Because if I need to remind any of you guys, if you need to watch any of his fights currently, there is one channel that you would have to look for on demand to see some of those fights, or at least see those fights, should I say. And that's Showtime. You have to go on Showtime Network to see those fights. So that's not true. And it's unfortunate that I don't think he necessarily understands what his contract actually is. He's scheduled to fight with at least maybe 2 or 3 other networks, but it's again strictly with this certain camp and certain networks that you can fight on. Now with this, though, he is having a deal at least where that can expire, or at least I believe he's as of now possibly a free agent. And Eddie Hearn, like I had mentioned before, has been making numerous offers to his team, which found very interesting is the fact that Eddie Hearn is offering $15 million for a voluntary fight, which would include a fight with Anthony Joshua. So you're getting $15 million for a fight that you're going to essentially take anyway, since it's going to be at least coming up if you're looking to do the rematch anyway. But, if, say, Fury's happens to be on that funny shit again in the buildup, and this fight just doesn't happen after that next voluntary, you at least now have that Anthony Joshua fight. And on top of that, the more money that you're going to make with that. So you're now completely out of the range of making that $2 to $4 million where you're being lowballed with these other guys. If Deontay Wilder doesn't take this deal, listen, this is the moment you've been waiting for. All right. That sitting to cash out, waiting for a better deal. Oh, they're holding out on my money. Dude, this is it. This is the offer that you've held out for. You take it now. If he doesn't take this, he was never serious from the jump. They were never serious from the jump. And it goes back to what my thought was originally with them, is that they're really just out there just to protect him. They know that he's a faulty fighter. They know that he's really he's going to be due up for a certain point in time where he's just going to get knocked out. They're just waiting for that to cash in. So up until the point in time where he fights someone incredible, they will continue to milk time and money. And should I say very little money, should I say, until then. Because until they actually do that, then maybe I'm at least wrong. I don't know what I'm trying to say at this point. You understand what I'm getting at here. Again, let me just check back in because I got some alerts going on, guys. See some chat here. Okay, Okay, it looks like Mike might be able to join the podcast, so give me a moment and I'm going to send him a link. How you guys liking the early start? You guys liking the early start for the podcast? A little bit doable? 11:30 isn't so daunting. You know what I mean? After this, I feel like I have my whole day, actually. You guys don't understand. I actually put in quite a bit to actually just do this. All right, I think we got our link. Copy. Where are you at? Oops. Close. All right. All right. Okay, Mike, I'm not sure if you're watching, but I had the link sent out to you. Go ahead, just jump in whenever you get it. All right. So let me get back to what I was on about. What was I on about? Yes, Eddie Hearn offering Deontay Wilder a deal, and if he's for real, he'll take it. Shouldn't be any fuss about it at all. Let's see. Top ranking offering where the same amount of money for a tune-up. My guess is that Wilder would rather go the Fury route because it's really safer than AJ, although it's no less difficult. See, here's the thing, Alexis. I think this Fury situation puts PBC in a really tight spot because you, as I, and everyone else, and everyone in that boardroom at PBC knows that Deontay Wilder got his ass whooped in that fight. And they know that it's more or less going to be the same in that next fight. He could possibly even get knocked out, considering how open he is when he's dried up if he can't get that knockout. And now what they're trying to do is they're trying to hold on to Deontay Wilder to save their life. But the thing is that you got Eddie Hearn creeping up, making offers. You got ESPN and Top Rank trying to creep up and make offers. So they're trying to still make it seem like, at least when it comes to his management, they're trying to still make it seem like they're willing to, work out a deal where they can just do co-promotion. And that's why I say so much that Deontay Wilder has to take that Eddie Hearn deal, because then he's for real. Because until that separation is, they're going to continue to mismanage him and get him the poorest out of or at least the worst part out of the deal. So it's again, the ball is in Deontay's court, not Finkel, not Al Heyman. It's Deontay Wilder. And he's been consistent, at least when it's coming to at least wanting to take the challenge or take challenges. So he should jump on this. Anyway, Parker versus Fury again, possibly a fight in Pulev. Again, this is nothing that no one's really fancying here, but it's unfortunately the cards that you're dealt when someone plans to just sabotage your actual rematch. And I think you guys as the fans should definitely take him to task for this, and I'm sure he's going to be hearing this for a while, because that is a total 180 to go from legacy to notoriety. It's things that you care about. That was really astonishing. But now at least just go over the weekend's fights, because at least we're now closing in on at least being filmed over an hour, or at least half hour now. But Joe Joyce knocked out Bermane Stiverne in the 6th round in London. This is the undercard for Chris Eubank Jr. and James DeGale. Joe Joyce I mentioned as I'm not sure if I actually did mention him on the podcast last week, but definitely a slow fighter that and a slow starting fighter who's 8-0 officially now. and is about 35 years old. So he's kind of being thrust somewhat on a fast track, really, to try to get into the bigger, more notable fights. Now, usually in this instance, at least in these cases, they're usually really extraordinary talents. You know what I mean? Like Lomachenko, for instance, is one who is pretty, at least now, notable. I think it's now understood that, you know, his is definitely well due and earned. I feel like this guy, though, is being a bit ran on just out of favor, really. Again, he knocked out Romain Saverne in the 6th round. Romain Saverne, again, just showed up, it seemed. Last week, I mentioned that he showed up at a record high 273 pounds for the weigh-in. And he reflected pretty much what that camp represented, pretty much. So if you go into camp, you gain weight, and he put on the performance that you expected. The first round I found almost embarrassingly poor, in the fact that he just literally stood right in the direct line of shots. And simply head movement alone, and I even posted this on the groups, I found it completely astonishing. The moment he finally started to move his head, he finally started having success and actually gave him opportunities to land shots himself. If you look at that first round, it was actually a little bit interesting to watch, actually. Jay Joyce gets clocked quite a few times and even gets marked up in one of the shots. And the simple head movement alone afforded him time, because he would have gone out if he didn't start moving his head. But he once he's finally started moving his head, at least afforded him at least about 4 to 5 rounds. But you know, it's just embarrassing at this point. It's like, how does Romain Saverne continue to get these opportunities, and let alone get the opportunities on its own? That's astonishing by itself. But the fact that you go up in there and you're like, oh man, this is my moment, this is my opportunity to fuck things up even more. It's like, you talk about self-sabotage of Tyson Fury. This guy does himself no favors. He goes in there, like I said, 273 pounds. He did nothing for his camp at all, it seemed like. And it's just countless times. Like, how many times are you just going to just show up as an impression of a failed boxer? That's what it seems like. It's like, hey, Romain Saverne, for Halloween, I want you to dress up like like a rejected boxer. Okay, I'm gonna go pack on 30 pounds and put my head in saran wrap and just eat right hands all night. And then even in the stoppage, I mean, he literally just looked at the ref like, "Are you gonna come stop this?" I mean, I did what I could here. Come on, come do it. It's just overall embarrassing. I'm kind of just tired of seeing the guy on TV. At this point, if you just see him on the scheduling, you know, he's for someone to just rack up their record, pretty much. James DeGale, Chris Eubank Jr. We talk about at least poor fighters. You talk about a poor fight in this one here. It's my God, was this hard to watch. James DeGale failed to really strike up any type of strategy, really, into this fight. Pretty much just assumed that just moving in a circle would be effective. Yeah, how exactly, I don't know. But it was pointed out, actually, on a podcast that I was with, Pound for Pot Boxing Report, with my colleague Michael, who was on last week. Mentioned that James DeGale didn't necessarily ever really have a great jab. And that led him to at least believe that Chris Eubank would just come in and do his work. And boy, did that guy end up being right as hell. Because, I mean, again, movement on its own, I don't assume what he thought that was going to do. He didn't create himself any angles. And even when there were angles to be created, he didn't even throw anything. I mean, it's not like Chris Eubank is some pillar of defense here. It's not like this is fucking the Chinese wall here. He didn't throw anything, and even when he tried to, he was falling all over himself. He couldn't throw a punch without tripping or just committing himself entirely into the punch, which he would oftentimes find himself over the shoulder of Chris Eubank Jr. and even at one point just being completely shoved off and lifted off the fucking ground. It was just embarrassing just overall. I mean, Chris Eubank Jr. just was, again, just almost was a shadow of the shadow of himself. Like, this is a very poor performance. Chris Eubank Jr., you guys know I don't think much of him. I don't rate him really much at all. I find him to almost pretty much be stylistically similar to Deontay Wilder and looping shots. Quite often you saw that even in this fight where he actually dropped DeGale twice. And DeGale, quite often those knockouts were actually just him pulling away with his chin out. And yeah, I mean, even those shots, there was nothing. They were winging shots when when he would get him hurt, and you'd see almost back to the old Chris Eubank Jr. They got outboxed by George Groves, and that's kind of at least the reason why I would assume that he would have lost this fight if there at least any part of an old James DeGale that was still there. But instead of the old James DeGale, an old James DeGale showed up. So that's at least, and on that note, he did actually, as of yesterday, officially retired as well. Calling it quits for a game, at least from the game, and rightfully so. I mean, if you're not beating the likes of Chris Eubank Jr. and what is a tender division as is, you're not going to beat the likes of a Callum Smith. You might not even beat. Well, let me not go there. Anyway, so yeah, that was at least those the fights over the weekend. Omar Douglas as well. I meant to mention him. He did end up unfortunately getting, not at least getting the decision against Lee Selby, but he did put a tremendous effort. Committed persistent pressure just all the time, creating some rough patches for Selby. Actually, was leading on the cards at least up to the 8th round. I've had it. And but I mean, you look at Lee Selby, he looked to at least be the loser. Of course, he cut again in this fight on both eyes. First cut got in the 2nd round. I believe the final ended up coming in the 11th. It wasn't necessarily sure exactly where that one started. But I mean, he but yeah, again, Lee Selby gets the decision. Omar Douglas again with a great or at least attempt though. I mean, he's really put in a good effort. It was one of my picks I at least had as a possible upset. That pretty much at least capped off the week. Up next, we are looking forward to at least seeing Erislandy Lara get back to the ring after his defeat against Jared Hurd, looking to get himself back into relevance against Brian Castellano, Argentine fighter, 15-0. And also, like I mentioned on the undercard, Luis Ortiz fighting Christian Hammer of Germany. Which I see at least Luis Ortiz getting a knockout in that. Erislandy Lara, aging fighter, coming off again a grueling fight. This fight is at least his assurance and his reminder that he is at least is still the champion. So how does he go? At least how does he fare? I say he should get the decision here. This Castellano is not necessarily. Well, I say he's traveled. He's been in the States before. He's traveled, at least France, I believe, even as well. Fight a few different in competition, I'd say, but he. I mean, there's a possibility of an upset here. My only issue with Castellano, because he is a good pressure fighter, and I do like his lead right hand, which again would be pretty useful, especially on a southpaw fighter. Is that if he's in there with an intelligent fighter, he does tend to freeze a bit, and at least for that reason, I see Lara should be able to squeak out this on point and should be able to box him. But again, this guy, he's a good pressure fighter. So let's say for some reason that he's not he's not afraid or he's not deterred by anything that Laura has to offer, he could go in there and actually create a more interesting fight than we may perceive this on paper. So just keep an eye out on that particular fight. Just saying. Not saying anything assuring, at least as confidently as I was before, at least on the Pound for Pound Boxing podcast. But just again, just keep an eye out. Trust me. All right, guys. So that'll be it. I think we did at least reach 45 minutes we're coming up on. So I'm going to go ahead and call it a day. I hope you guys enjoy the boxing this weekend. Thank you again for tuning in. We'll catch you next week. Peace.